It takes a few minutes to get the live stream and the YouTube and the Zoom. It's doing that again.
I think we had like this one on, maybe? The one over you off.
So that people can still see, but not
Thought we did this
do
one.
brain surgery.
Does that work?
I mean, if everyone is okay with that and can see,
It looks like there's light on the.
Is there enough light with these two off?
I'm good.
can everybody see?
Is it the same Wi-Fi in here as in the White House?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's in one that joined.
I just changed. I switched mine out. This one's too high.
How about this one? How about this one? Take this one.
Well, there's like 4 different.
There are many different kinds.
Yeah.
Here, here, here.
Oh my gosh.
Now I can't tell.
And we'll just remove this one over here because we don't need it to.
Today, we're practicing patience.
Are we live?
Yeah.
We are live and we're broadcasting. All right.
Okay. You're ready to go.
By the way, I must say that I really appreciate having the printed ones that are not like switching back and forth in screens. It's really nice.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, just testing. You can hear me okay? Yeah, we're good? Okay. Okay, I'm going to call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for March 24th, 2022. It is 10:01 a.m. and Commissioner Kula, would you lead us in the flag salute?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's a much nicer sound than all of us on our Zoom calls, I must say.
No more solos.
Yes.
You have a whole chorus.
Okay. That brings us to our calendar session. Commissioners, anything to add to the joint session?
I haven't seen anything new past what Carolina sent us.
Okay, thank you. And the first transportation meeting is Friday, April 1st,
Yes.
correct? Okay. Can I add to the intersection on 240 and what is it with the stop sign? With the white fence. I'll get to it.
Red Hills Road.
Red Hills Road.
right?
Yes, there was a roller accident there, so if I could just quickly add that spot
Yeah.
to your list.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's and I will say, so full disclosure, we're doing these road safety tours, and then that's actually one that both the sheriff's office and RIAC
Okay.
talk about all the time. Right? Yeah, and they're trying to figure out whether that fence is
Yes.
safe. So thank you.
The white fence.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, item D is public comment. This time is reserved for public comment on any topic other than our agenda items, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. Is there any public comment? I know we did not receive any via email.
And I guess the next step is for those that are, this is new for us, but if there's anyone participating or attending the meeting in the Zoom platform that wishes to give public comment, if you raise your hand, we can unmute you and you can provide your public comment.
If we raise our hand, does it show up on the right side
Mhm.
of the name? Okay. Okay, Well, seeing none. That brings us to item E, which is department update. And today we had Gary Wertz from Investigation.
Yes, and we received word yesterday. He had a scheduling conflict this morning. He had an appointment that he had to go to, so he's not able. So we'll find another date on the calendar and get him scheduled where he can come.
Sounds good. Item F is work session, and we have review and discussion of the strategic capital planning project. This is continued from February 10th of 2022. And I believe we are being joined by, oh, maybe not. Is it Alto that's joining us today?
So,
Or Sarah?
Sarah Architects representatives, we're in the process of promoting them into the panel so they can present. They're joining us remotely.
Good morning, everybody.
Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. You're still
We
reading
can't,
that
we can see you, but we can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Let me test that out.
Key is that she has to keep talking.
But she's not muted.
I'm gonna need my glasses because I can't read the names very well.
Okay, additional test. Can you hear me?
Do we know if we can hear from there?
Ashley, can you hear us?
Okay.
Can you say something so we can see if we're having audio issues on our end?
Sure. Can you hear me? Test, audio test.
Zoom to the room.
Can you?
Oh,
Trying to-
There we go.
Is that better?
Yes, we can hear now.
All right, great.
It wasn't on your end. So
Not an official Zoom meeting without any sort of technical difficulty. Well, I believe we are still waiting on a few of my colleagues with Sarah Architects to join. We're expecting Chris Michael and Becky Epstein to join us here shortly.
what's going on?
Did she say Chris Michael? Who's joining us?
Yes.
Okay, I see the name. Yeah.
Try it again.
yeah,
There it
they're-
goes.
now they're in the ether.
Okay, I just got a message from Becky. It says they are having trouble connecting, but should be here shortly. Thank you all for your patience.
Oh, isn't technology wonderful?
You know, we've had a year, 15 months? No, we've had more than
Longer,
that because it was
yeah.
before you sworn in. So
Mark, it would have
we
been,
are all used to this. It's just we're not used to being in a room together.
Right.
yeah. It's been what, 2 years?
Okay.
Because it was April of 2020.
Was it April? I feel like we went for longer than that in person.
Maybe.
Okay,
because
there's
we did
Chris.
budget.
We did budget in
Budget
person.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah. We'll call it 18 months. Although I think it might have been more than that.
Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi, Chris.
Terribly sorry about that. That was on my end.
Okay. We're still getting back into the hang of things with being in room 32 again, so.
So is Becky not able to promote?
I've promoted her several times. It's not.
Rather than hold everybody up, I think we can get started. I know
Sure.
Becky wanted to be here, but I think she's having the same technical difficulties on our end.
You can actually allow her to talk even if she's in the audience. Okay.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, we'll work on camera in a minute. Let's get started though.
For the record, if each of you could state your name and address, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. Becky Epstein, 10015 Southwest 35th Avenue, Portland, Oregon.
Chris Weigel with Sarah Architects. I'm at 19240 Rideman Court, West Lynn, Oregon.
Ashley Nora with Sarah Architects, 1380 Southwest Delwood Avenue, Portland, Oregon.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us.
So you guys ready to get an update on the strategic capital framework plan?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Mind if I share my screen?
Do.
Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
Becky, you want to start us off?
Sure, we're really excited to walk you through today where we're at and the options that we've been developing with your stakeholders, the county stakeholders, and also to talk a little bit about potential cost impacts and what we're seeing in the marketplace right now, what you're probably experiencing as well, and then talk through some next steps for that strategic path that we're working on.
So what we're going to start off with is just a recap of what's gotten us here to date. If there are any questions, please feel free to speak up as I'm going along here. So obviously it started last year with the property condition assessment of your existing conditions and a space needs analysis that then outlined a series of future development options, of which you've decided to proceed with option number 3. And along with that, some opportunities for expansion that we had identified in and around your current facilities. So we've started down this strategic capital planning effort with the following objectives. I think these are all clear. We shared this with you the last time around. But if there isn't any questions about the objectives, this is just a reminder, we're looking to meet those programmatic needs for 2020 through 2035 for the courts. The property condition assessment is going to be the basis for the costs of the repairs. And we wanted to make sure that we developed a clear, actionable plan. We're measuring success based on the following criteria, but we've been working out with the stakeholders group. I don't think any of this is new. These are the same measurements that we've used previously. And as we went through the last time around, we utilized our project compass to start to identify where the importance factors should be placed when we look at how we want to develop into the future. So this compass just gives us some direction about where we want to exceed standard performances to be improved, better, or exemplary. So it kind of gives us a guide, point us in the right direction. We also spent some time looking at the overall context. So we've defined the area that we were looking at as this area of downtown McMinnville between 3rd and 7th, Davis and Galloway. We've numbered the blocks to kind of make it easier to talk about them. And then this shows you a little bit of some of the things that impact each of these different blocks. From a zoning perspective, one of the biggest impacts is the requirements for parking. Those yellow blocks require only 50% of the required parking. Gray blocks on the right-hand side will require 100% of the parking requirements, where blue blocks, if you develop on those, don't require any parking to meet with zoning ordinance. And you can also see in black your existing buildings overlaid on each of these blocks, just to give you an understanding of the overall context and some of the drivers behind some of these options. We've also taken the liberty of getting into a little bit of detail with your existing buildings, because we know you want to reuse your facilities where it makes sense. And in particular, around the existing courts buildings, that's what's going to be most important. So this gives you just an idea of the kind of level of detail at which we're trying to look at when it comes to some of these smaller additions and renovations. We'll go through these in a little bit more detail, but you can see here, looking at additions to the south for the Justice Center and security parking, with the sheriff's remodel to the west side of the building. Some of those things, just to show you kind of again, the level of detail at which we are looking at with some of these facilities, particularly with the renovations and additions. So now I want to kind of briefly go over a kind of history of all the different strategic options that we have shared with the stakeholders group. And that group had focused in on 3 final options. So I'm going to take you through the 7 that we looked at very briefly at a very high level. And if you have any questions about these 7 options, feel free to ask, and then we'll dive into the 3 that the stakeholders groups had identified as the 3 most likely to go forward with, that we went into a little bit more detail with.
Hey, Chris.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Can I interrupt? Could you go back to that previous slide?
Sure.
Because I know, I don't believe the last time that we met with the Board of Commissioners that we necessarily went over this outline in detail. So I think it might be worthwhile to actually spend maybe a couple more minutes going over the elements specific to the courthouse, because I know the other options don't get into this kind of detail around that courthouse.
Very helpful.
So just to give you an idea of some of the programmatic needs, obviously there's a renovation component of the existing courthouse to backfill the appraisal area with a courtroom and create accessible jury deliberations rooms in the basement. On the first floor, we're looking at enhancing the entry and lobby for security and accessibility reasons. Also looking at renovating the existing restrooms, adding the court's clerk check-in and consolidated cashier's room, and enlarge the existing break room. And then create on the second floor a secure juvenile courtroom. Now, the blue bar along the bottom of the screen is what we're calling the Justice Center and Courthouse Addition. This would be out in front of the existing building, and it's approximately 30,000 square feet. It would include not only the relocating the secure parking for the sheriffs, but also the Justice Center and the secure parking. So this is the commissioner's meeting room, community corrections, CJIS building conference rooms. Upstairs would be adult courtrooms, and then a secure passageway to non-juvenile courtrooms, along with a secure holding room and large conference room for juries in treatment court, along with attorney conference rooms. That's the big addition, which is the 30,000 square foot. And that orange bar is a link back to the existing building. And then the smaller renovations are the renovation of the jail to renovate restitution and what's referred to as J block to accommodate the current jail needs. That's that yellow bar on the right-hand side. And then there's the sheriff's office remodel, is to backfill the sheriff's office with juvenile probation. That is the blue bar on the west-hand side. So all of this sets up the space needs for not only the expansion of the courthouse, but it also provides the renovation for the jail and the sheriff's department. It's going to be needed out for the next 20 years. And this proposal runs through all of the different schemes that you'll look at for the most part.
That's why.
So just real quick, where's the parking go?
So there's a reduced amount of surface parking that's to the east side on the block. And then there's parking below grade below that, Justice Center, secure parking.
Okay.
Which is an addition because we don't have secure parking. Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chris.
So again, going back to the larger, higher level of the strategic options that we looked at, I'm going to take a quick run through the 7 options that we had gone through. Option 1, and I'm just going to focus on some of the high level pros of each of these. And what I want you to look at is you'll see a theme here in that the blue boxes represent new construction, the green boxes represent remodel, and then we'll call the yellow orange are the demo and repurpose versus the vacated, which is the light yellow color through all of these. So option 1, the good neighbor, provides a lower scale of buildings and increased green space for the community, but there's a lot of cons in that it doesn't meet all the parking needs. It takes a long period of time to do the construction. Option 2 is what we call calculated consolidation. This consolidates the HHS and admin buildings. They become vacant at one time, and we get one large facility just to the north of the current courthouse building, and it meets all of the parking needs. This is one that we developed further. Option 3, we called utilize more existing building stock. So it's centrally located, planning, tax and assessment, Clerk and County adjacent to one another, and it sells off the vacant properties to the south, the current health and planning buildings to help fund the Justice Center and courthouse renovation. Option 4 is an option that we called utilize a new municipal garage. So it takes the site of the current city garage, and we place a new HHS on that site. It sells the vacated properties, and it meets the court's needs sooner than a lot of the other options by developing the addition onto the courts earlier on rather than later. The next option, option 5, is what we call baby steps. This one's closest to what was originally envisioned in the previous study. It has the smallest amount of moves with the least amount of impact, but it does take a long time to get through this process. It reuses the most existing building stock, and it vacates the most historic structures, which will help you long term. Option 6 is what we call pull the Band-Aid. This one has the shortest time period. It consolidates service into 3 properties, but it also has the largest amount of upfront costs, and it's going to be the most disruptive to the staff. And then option 7 is what we call the blender. It blends a lot of these different things together from these previous options. It maintains presence along the major thoroughfare, along Evans Street, keeps the county buildings on the major bus lines, and it consolidates services onto 3 properties. Allows the city to have flexibility with the community center, and it vacates a number of properties that can be sold off to help finance and fund additional development. But this one relies, again, on a new building on the existing parking facility just to the west of the courthouse and jail buildings. So when we met as a stakeholder team and reviewed all 7 of these options, we utilized a process called choosing by advantages to try to quantify the differences between these 7 options. And we identified these various advantages, which are listed here, and then put weights to the importance of each of these advantages. So consolidating county programs with future expansion and beyond was the highest, right? The second highest advantage was incorporating space needs for health and human services, just to give you an idea. Whereas, reusing the existing building stock was not quite as high on the weighted score. And so when we went through and we scored each of the different options, it became pretty clear there were a couple of options, calculated consolidation and the blender, that came out and scored much higher. So those were two that we obviously wanted to develop. And then baby steps, since this one was closest to what our original directive was, we wanted to keep this one as well as an option that we pushed forward and developed further. Are there any questions about those 7 options and the process that we used to get down to 3?
Nope.
Commissioners? No?
Thank you.
Appreciate the name.
So that's a lot of background, and I went through it really fast. But I'm going to now go through these 3 options in just a little more detail, and give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have about them. Okay. So we'll start with baby steps, right? So you can see here on the right-hand side is kind of step by step how we envision strategically you implementing the overall plan, right? It would be to find temporary space for the folks that are located here right now, which is IT, community corrections, and then relocate the Abacus program to a new location, right? So this would be likely leased space, demo these existing facilities, and then build new for a new HHS building that's 3 stories and have the parking structure below and to the side of it above. So this makes for a 3-story building with 500 parking stalls, right? Step 4 would then be to vacate the Evans complex and a series of other buildings, and then move the clerk tax and assessment planning into Evans, the Beerley building with minor remodels. So all of these buildings would then get remodeled. Okay, and then county admin into the Moore building with a more moderate remodel. And then we could vacate this entire block in its entirety. And then last, but certainly not least, would be to build the Justice building and then renovate the courthouse, and the courtyard jail. That would be the final step in this process. And so here are some of the pros and cons of this.
Chris, would you mind going over the pros and cons? They're just logistically, they're hidden behind your faces. Oh, never mind.
And hard to
Sorry,
read. That eye.
So yeah, so the pros of this one are it's the smallest amount of moves with the least amount of impact. It reuses the most existing building stock, and it vacates most of the historic structures. And the positive behind vacating those historic structures are obvious. Those structures are the ones that are least catered to what you actually do day to day, and they're the ones that you spend the most amount of money on from a maintenance standpoint. The cons of this is that it's going to take a long time because we're doing a lot of smaller steps. And one of the other cons is that it addresses the courthouse needs last. And this requires upgrades to the maintenance of the Beverly building, which is in poor condition. It requires upgrades to the maintenance of the Moore building, which is in poor condition. So 2 pretty significant renovations. And it requires leased swing space, and the parking needs are not fully met. We're pretty close. We're 100 spaces short of what would be ideal. And it does require upgrades to public transportation circulation pathways. So those are the cons to this one.
Can you go over, Chris, I'm not sure what I understand about the requires upgrades to public transportation.
So right now, public transportation is running along this 5th Street corridor. And most of your services would now be located further north. So it's not ideal to have that public transportation more than a block away from the entrance to your facilities, ideally. So that's what we're talking about. Are there any questions about baby steps?
And Chris, when you mentioned the parking needs, that are not met, it's not ideal. It's by city requirements, not that it's not ideal.
Correct. The city zoning requirements, which are remarkably robust. I'll put it that way.
As in so many parking spots.
Yes. Okay. So I'll move on now to calculated consolidation. This was option 2. So the first step in this process is to build out the Justice Center immediately. Okay, with the courthouse addition and so the Justice Center and the courthouse addition get built immediately. We would then move IT into that addition, so we'd be able to clear out some space there. We would then demo the facilities on this block and relocate the Abacus program, and then go and build a new building similar to what I described in the last option, which is a 3-story HHS centered building, and the public services requirements in there. So that's one larger building with a full block of underground parking and 3 stories of parking above grade over a portion of this lot to meet the parking requirements. Step 4 would then be to vacate the Evans complex, Fairly Moore, Public Health, HHS, Spencer House, Fenton Planning, Stern. So all of that gets vacated. And then you can go back and then remodel the courthouse, the jail. And then last but not least, step 6 is to demo the existing HHS complex and underground and partial above grade parking structure with green space on this roof. So it would be to finalize this block in that final step. So the pros and cons of this option is it really consolidates your services to 3 blocks, which from a long-term perspective is a huge pro. It moves each staff group once, so there's not a push to get into lease space. It utilizes the existing county-owned properties where we can. And then all of the HHS and admin buildings become vacant at one time. So there's a kind of, a single kind of vacating of property and make things available. And this option does exceed your the zoning requirements for parking. Some of the cons is the construction does occur over a long period of time because we've got some fairly large buildings. The courthouse remodel is done last, so that gets put off even though the addition is done first. And it does require some interaction with the historic review for the demo of the admin and the stabilization house. And it has the same issue with the public transportation circulation, because things are located more to the north. Any questions about this option?
Sure, Commissioner Sterrett.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Question about, has there been any discussion or any input or conversation about where staff would temporarily relocate if this were considered?
Not yet. No, we haven't gotten into those details yet because depending on which path we end up adopting as a strategic plan, then that would be incorporated into the next phase. With not really knowing, because at this point we took it from 7 options to 3, we haven't really been able to get into the details on necessarily the final, what the buildings would look like, where we'd need to move folks, what's available for leasing off,
How big of a space we'll need for each of those.
right. So we're not there yet. So yeah, I think once I'm anticipating and that might be in the next phase of the planning, depending on the strategic direction that we end up going.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, maybe Ken, for this one, if we do the addition in number 1,
Mhm.
what kind of pressure does that alleviate on the courthouse realistically? I mean, is that Does that make it doable to save the courthouse remodel for the last?
Well, because the option one also includes the addition of courtrooms.
Yeah.
In that building that helps with any immediate needs for courtroom spaces in
Okay.
that building. It also, it increases spacing for instead of having to lease potentially with some other options, not
Yeah.
thinking that far ahead. So, I mean, it does work. It's kind of like this, we're setting up dominoes and which one needs to fall first and which one is going to be the most beneficial in executing this. And it seemed like with this plan, at least we'd be addressing some of the short-term court needs,
Mhm.
but also keeping in mind that I think the biggest struggle is with how big HHS is and what the number of employees and programs and everything else is. That's really the major domino that I see,
Mhm.
because that is, 300 plus employees right there, just for that one program alone.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kula?
And I think mine are probably like after we hear this, the next of the three, and then I'll ask a few questions that I think cover all of them. So that's
Okay.
okay.
Perfect.
And sorry, Chris, if you had anything more that you wanted to correct me on or more to add.
Nope, that was great, Ken. That was perfect. The last option we're going to look at is the one that we call the blender. This one starts with leasing space for IT and community corrections in the Abacus program to clear out this site. We vacate Northeast Ford and 6th, Block 4, and propose a city land swap for the parking structure with green space. So we swap land for the parking structure with the city for this property. We demo the existing municipal parking structure and build the HHS building with a full block of underground parking and 3 stories of above grade parking to build that structure here. So the real push is to get that HHS building built sooner rather than later. Step 4 would be to vacate the Evans complex, purely more public health, HHS admin and stabilization. So these are all vacated, and then we are able to then go on to step 5, which is the building the Justice Center courthouse addition. And then come back on step 6 and build the public services building, which is a new 2-story, 33,000 square feet building for the clerk, tax and assessment planning, and county admin, with underground parking and green space above. And then on step 7, we're able to then vacate these remaining buildings, Benton, Spence, Stern. And then step 8 is to then go back and remodel the courthouse and the jail. So you can see some of the similarities and differences between these options. The pros of this one is that it maintains the presence along Evans Street for county services. It keeps the county buildings on the major bus line, right? It allows the city to have flexibility with the community center, Block 4. Vacates the properties to be sold, which can then go on to fund some of these other developments. It doesn't change the feel of the commercial block or the neighborhood, and it maintains flexibility for maintaining the Moore building. And this option does meet all of the parking requirements. Some of the cons to this approach is there's an uncertainty of whether or not you can obtain the parking structure, demo it, but you'll have to coordinate that with the city. That's certainly a big point of conversation. It involves 3 new buildings versus 2 in the other schemes, right? And construction occurs over a longer period of time because of these kind of demo and move and vacation of things. And there is going to be some interaction with the historic review for the demo of the admin and the stabilization house. The last plan. Any questions about this option?
So this one would require leasing then for the first and second when they vacate that area.
Yep.
Okay.
That would be for IT.
For IT.
and,
Mhm.
Yep.
Community
rural
correct,
prevention.
right.
Justice,
Yep.
Right.
Have we talked about the clerk's office, the clerk's building, or did I miss that piece?
It's all on
I think it's
block
within
7, or
7.
what's highlighted in as 7 is the clerk's office would be in there.
And they would be moved to this new building once it's constructed.
So that would be
Thank you.
potentially vacated and sold.
Thank you.
Mhm. And the one part, because there's still a lot to go, but because we were going to have with that, we were going to be showing the parking garage and some of those things. I did reach out and
Okay.
Justin and I met with Jeff Towery at the city of McMinnville, and to just let them know that, you know, I just as a courtesy that that's city property.
We're talking about you.
And we're
drawing
looking at it
it.
and we're talking about it.
We got our
and
eye on it.
and so we had a really good conversation with Jeff, and so he's aware of our planning effort and that we're looking at that property.
And you're looking at blowing it up.
Mhm.
Always
I
good to
heard
know if you
demo
own,
and-
if you own the building, it's good to know other people are thinking about blowing it
All
up.
right.
I agree, Commissioner. I was gonna say, Chair, I heard demo, not blowout. Chair, I did want to ask one thing.
Sure.
And then, so Chris, do we get all of the leased space then that we currently lease into these footprints? I'm just thinking of Kirby, and don't we have some of the Beaumont or the old hospital?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The whole lots of things.
that would include, because all the planning for the HHS is also looking at Kirby, more building, even though we own more building, but then also the lease space that's adjacent to the more building. That's one of the things we are looking at. That includes not just consolidation in our campus area, but also other leased areas where we have programs, you know, in Kirby being a great example of
Okay,
that.
great. That's super helpful. Thank you.
So the 1 and 2 block, you said it was going to be green space or park. Was there something else in there?
I think it's kind of open and kind
Okay.
of up to the city on
Okay.
if we're able to negotiate something, what the city may envision or want to do with that property.
Okay.
If they're agreeable to doing a swap with those tracks.
Right.
But the understanding is that we would develop it for them.
I don't
In
think we would
exchange
develop
for-
those blocks.
I think it really depends on what the city wants to do. I think
Okay.
that would be subject of like further meetings with the city and what they envision. I think when we first looked at it, it was whether or not we were going to need to replace the parking garage and possibly develop parking over there, or parking garage. You know, that may be part of the conversation
Okay.
on what that might look like. But at this point, if I remember correctly, and Chris or any of the Sarah architect team, I think actually with the 3-story HHS building with the adjoining parking, we actually might be picking up more parking spots in that new addition than what the current parking garage even provides
Right.
with its current layout. But
It's really close. And then the other thing that we were thinking of, again, Tim's right, it's really up to the city, but just because this becomes a residential neighborhood very quickly, as an urban planner, it's difficult to propose large-scale parking structures and buildings that are flanked on 2 sides by residential properties. But obviously, it would make a great, open green space for this community, right? And everything that surrounds it.
So the block 3, the parking structure right now is predominantly used by people using county services or also the community center. That's
Employees.
all the above.
employees. Okay.
Atticus,
So
3rd Street.
there may be some additional need for parking if we take over that spot for city purposes. Oops.
Well, that would be I'm assuming it's a good question, Chair. Would that be available for anybody?
It could be. I mean, it could be
Okay.
when we're off hours, if we have a
Right.
parking garage that's attached to a county building, just like our parking lots now during the weekends. There, a lot of our parking lots, including around the White House, are utilized for 3rd Street events, just visitors to McMinnville. So how we manage that be a decision down the road, and making that parking available.
Okay. Commissioners, any more questions?
No, Chair.
No?
I do have one more, and this is like, it's a going back to that original slide of the different parking requirements on different spaces. And I'm nervous about reminding us that the block that's on either side of Third Street doesn't require any parking. And while I recognize that that's all developed, and we're also talking about having to build 250 to 500 parking spots, and just the cost of that is enormous on its own. And there are blocks that exist that don't have parking. So I'm not sure if that was ever considered. It doesn't look like it was ever considered.
We did talk about that.
Okay.
And
Thought about
And yep, there's certainly in developing with heavier development on this block. This is one of those blocks that has the 50% reduction in parking requirement. And just, we're talking about the zoning requirements. You may decide that you need the parking and may want to develop it to 100% if you want. The flip side of it is by vacating some of these properties in the areas that don't require parking, may make them even more valuable to people who would like to privately develop those
Right.
for uses.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I just
Okay.
do one clarification on the blender, because you had asked about this in the previous slide about the courthouse, or kind of justice center. So the one that's the long rectangle. Does in this particular, in the blender option, which I feel silly saying, but whatever, the blender option, is there any way to relieve the pressure on the courts under that model in an earlier way?
Well, the one part that I would point out is to a certain degree, because we have the assessor and juvenile, we have some limited operations in the courthouse. And so, how interchangeable or adaptive we could possibly be with the courthouse or the local government. I think we have some flexibility there, except, we'll have to lease space, again, for corrections. So there is a need there. But I'd also highlight that any courthouse improvements, we're definitely going to want to connect with the state and see what funding is going to be available, and keeping in mind that that's a pretty extensive, lengthy process. I think there's some courthouse projects that have been on that list for many, many, many years. And so, and especially when we get to the next phase with, in the presentation, when we talk about cost, that's going to be another significant driver as well, is the timing of and the potential of securing state funds to help with some of the courthouse remodels as well.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you for addressing that. All right, then Chair, I'm good now.
Thank you.
So great segue, Ken. Let's talk about costs. So with each of these three options that the stakeholders group had selected, we asked our cost consultants, DCW, to take a look at the cost projections of each of these facilities. And to just give you an understanding, the costs that you're looking at are capital costs for these construction of these buildings and renovation of these buildings. And we start with the assumed construction cost based on today's values. Then we take into account escalation based upon each plan's sequencing that we just walked through. And then we're adding on top of that escalated construction costs, 35% for total project costs. So that 35% is what's normally referred to as soft costs. It's the design fees, legal, furniture, all of those other things that go along with the building that aren't part of the construction costs of the actual facility. So while these capital costs are significant, and that's what we're going to look at today, other costs that should be taken into consideration are ongoing maintenance and operational costs, and obviously funding sources as well. All those things need to be thought about, but this is kind of the first step And so we've got some initial cost feedbacks from our cost team that I'm going to share with you. We're still reviewing these in more detail, so they're certainly not finalized. But you can see here the 3 different options: calculated consolidation at the top, and the 5 steps. This column indicates, so we've got the area of each of the scope of work, the cost per square foot, and then the construction cost in today's dollars. And then we have made assumptions on escalation by year for each of these, which gets us to the escalated construction costs. The soft costs get added in, and then here is the total project costs that you'd be looking at. So in big picture, the calculated consolidation option comes in at about $158 million in construction costs. Once it's been escalated out with the project soft costs, that total cost is just above $270 million. For the baby steps option, that cost is significantly lower. It's $129 million of construction costs. Project costs come in at $247 million. And then the blender is the third option. These construction costs come in at $169 million of construction costs. And by the time it's pushed out with escalation and project costs, you're at $306 million. Just reminding you, as we discussed with some of these, like the baby steps, this doesn't meet all of your parking requirements in this option compared to the other 2. And from a ranking perspective, when we go back and compare the choosing by advantages, you can see here the scores that the blender and calculated consolidation were at the much higher 467 and 433, whereas the baby steps didn't meet all of the advantages as nicely as we would want, came in at 247. And then here are those costs. So when we look at these kind of in a graph, you can start to see here the total score along the bottom, total cost running vertically. So certainly these 2 seem to be, in a more ideal situation, whereas the score of this is significantly lower, even though it does have slightly lower construction costs over the long term. So that gives you an idea of what you can expect to spend on these projects. Are there any questions about the overall costs?
Chris, how does the sale of our property factor into this?
So that is not included in the scope of work. We have not taken a step of trying to assume sales prices for those vacated lots.
Thank you.
But can you remind me, Chris, Chair, if I may, do all of these include the same level of consolidation or vacation of buildings?
No.
Back to the question about, okay,
The baby
Okay.
steps doesn't.
okay,
The blender and the calculated consolidation have an equal amount of vacated property, I do believe. And it's the baby steps that still retains a significantly larger amount of your existing stock.
okay, thank you.
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris.
So are there any other questions before I go on to next steps?
No, thank
No,
you.
I'm good.
Thank you.
So our next steps are to obviously we've got this session. We're going to issue a draft of the report that summarizes everything that we put together to date next week. And then we're hoping to get comments next month. And we will then present the final draft of the report at the end of April. I just want to take a moment to thank all the folks in the stakeholders group. We've worked with a lot of different communities over the years, and that group has been excellent that being able to listen to each other and kind of learn and grow and come to consensus, it's not always that easy with the groups that we work with in the past. So I just wanted to thank them for all their hard work and effort. Anything else?
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you very much.
No, this is super helpful.
Yeah,
A
Thank
you.
lot to think about for the next step.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for our architect team, and I'll just say the same thing, they've been very helpful, and I think helping to facilitate the discussions and these exercises that we're going through. We saw the estimates for the first time yesterday too, so it silenced all of us as well, because especially when we're really looking at, the current situation, the current needs, the layout of the campus, and then when you're, the fun part is looking at, boy, it'd be great, and looking at all the maps, and then all of a sudden we see the cost estimates, and it takes a while to really take that in and absorb that, but which I'm still working on, because again, I saw it for the first time yesterday morning. So, but again, I just wanted to say thank you to Becky and Ashley and Chris and the rest of the team who've done an outstanding job in helping to navigate this process. And if there's questions or anything else that you want us to take a look at or review, please let us know.
Thank you.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
I think we can get 100 million for the White House. What do you think?
It's really nice. I do think,
Priceless. It's priceless.
I mean, obviously this is a much longer conversation, right? But I'm like, that's a significant amount of money, a huge amount of money either way.
Mhm.
And I also remember hearing pretty clearly from downtown merchants and from Chamber of Commerce and from the city of McMinnville that they want to have more economic activity downtown. And I think of those with 2.5, 3.5 blocks that are in the core of downtown, as that's potential, right? It represents potential. How we do that, I don't know.
Yeah, and honestly, when you look at the process that we're going through, we'll have this report, we'll have this chart moving forward. We haven't really got into the financial details. We haven't got into what's available, things like, the sale of properties and how we can offset those costs, what other options are available. That's going to be all included with the future planning. Because again, we're just making lines on a map at this point, and we haven't gotten into the actual design elements, or looking for ways that how can we bring that price tag down? How can we save costs? Is there other opportunities that become available that may help offset, that significant of an expense? I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around a lot of these plans and the cost estimates. But then, we walk through our offices and I get these daily reminders, being in a lot of these buildings that weren't designed for commercial use, and really trying to, how much of a cost savings or how much improved processes and improved services would we see on being able to consolidate and to have better wayfinding so people can find our services, and we're not spread out as much as we are. So I'm trying to keep all that in mind, while at the same time, really pleased with how the process went. And that really, with the options that were presented, it really checks all the boxes on a lot of the needs that were identified in this space analysis, both on operations, maintenance, drawing a blank now, but it really checks all the boxes. But we also recognize that sometimes you have to compromise, at some point, because we don't necessarily, I can't write a check tomorrow to do that and,
No.
to accomplish that. So now we have to figure out the next phase with a lot of planning ahead of us.
Thank
For
you.
sure.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
thanks. And really thanks to the stakeholder team as well. I mean, I realize it's it was a big commitment of time for everybody. And it looks like you really wrestled with the possibilities. Sorry, Chair.
Well, I was just gonna say, and this conversation has been going on for a while, but is there a general understanding that we're operating under that HHS has the highest priority need?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's the one that we're really looking at because also just like I was saying earlier, in order to facilitate some of the other smaller improvements or moves, whichever option we elect to go down, with the 350 plus employees in HHS, that's the most needs. And then with the areas that they're vacating, then that gives us flexibility to reevaluate, remodel, use for temporary spaces for until the other construction can have. So that really addressing that first really helps with the prioritization and how the rest of the plan gets implemented.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair, can I
Sure.
request a short 2-minute recess?
Sure. We are going to take a 2-minute recess. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have to find my plug. All right.
Your plug, the one behind you?
No, I
Oh, that's
need to find an outlet too. I knew there was that one. Oh, yeah.
Did she have the shocked
Or
face
at least the,
with the cost?
the,
unmute.
Was that? We're supposed to gavel us out.
No, it's okay.
Okay, we are resuming the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for March 24th, 2022. It is 11:04. And it looks like we are moving on to item consent agenda. I was reviewing some past meetings and I have never read all of the items. Is it preferred if I actually read through them? Each one?
I think we did that when it was, we would do that when we didn't have an informal prior to the formal informal.
Except for the board did empower
Yes.
staff to start placing things on the consent agenda consistent with past practice if it's something that's recurring. So I don't believe you have to read
Each item.
each item.
Okay. Commissioners, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Starrett moves approval of the consent agenda. Any further discussion?
No chair.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Let's see. Brings us to item H, which is old business. We have none. And item I is other business. Item I1 is consideration of a sponsorship for the Oregon Workforce Partnership, OWP 2022 Working Together Conference. And this is an item added by Commissioner Kula. And I just want to state that before we get into a routine with public testimony, I will ask for public testimony from anyone who's online before we start discussion of each item. So if anyone has public testimony for agenda item I1, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Commissioner Kula, did you want to?
Yeah, so I was asked to, or we, Commissioner, or Chair Berchero and I were both asked if we would consider this as part of our service on the Jobs Council and the One Workforce Partnership. I will say that I don't have a burning desire to sponsor this event, but I wanted to at least give you all the option to consider it.
Yeah, it looks like the options are fairly expensive, starting at 2,000 and going up to 15. So
And I would say Commissioner Starrett was nodding along with me, so there might be consensus there.
Yes, Chair. I think some of these things in the past, when we've been asked to sponsor things, we have to remember that the source of anything we sponsor comes from the taxpayer. So I would not be in favor of sponsoring that.
okay, yes, I agree. While we will certainly participate, I think at this time it's not appropriate use
Yeah.
of the funds. So
Great. It did my duty.
Thank
Okay, and because if we're not taking any action, we don't need to make a vote, but
yes,
thank you. And thank you, staff, for getting that on the agenda.
thank you. Okay, so we will move on to item I2, consideration of approval of the agreement and memorandum of understanding MOU between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and Yamhill Community Care Organization for the funding of service integration teams retroactive to January 1st, 2022.
Chair, I would move approval of item H2. This is very necessary and a very valuable service in the community in that it offers specific services and funding for things that are just not covered anywhere else in our community. So I would move approval.
Wonderful. Commissioner Starrett has moved approval of item I2. Is there any further discussion?
If I could second it, second.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Item I3 is consideration of approval of an agreement between Yamhill County and Crook County for space available detention bed rental at the rate of $160 per bed per day, effective 7/1/2022, excuse me, with an automatic renewal clause on a year-by-year basis. Commissioners, do I have a motion to approve?
Chair, I would move we approve.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this item? No? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I4, consideration of approval of an amendment for an agreement between Yamhill County and Polk County for 4 detention bed rentals at the rate of $168 per bed per day, effective July 1st, 2022, with an automatic renewal clause on a year-by-year basis. Commissioners, do I have a motion to approve?
Chair, I would move that we approve.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Item I5, discussion of budget committee vacancies. And it looks like we have 2 positions that we need to discuss. One of them is Denny Elmer, who has submitted an application for renewing his seat. And then there is a vacancy for Rick John, who will not be renewing this time. So we thank him for his service. It's a lot of time and effort to go through and study our budget and take 3 days off of work. So we thank him for that as well. And it looks like in the packet, I don't think I have
I have them.
you have them there printed out. Okay.
I can pull them. They're not in the packet, but they were in our email.
So commissioners, how do you want to tackle this? Do you want to discuss Denny's?
Chair,
seat
I would
first?
I would say that I would be happy to make a motion to approve reappointing Denny to his position.
Okay,
But I wanted to make sure there wasn't, but you can get further discussion and work from there.
And just to clarify that with Denny's appointment, because his term expired June 30 of last year. So his would be a new term, and any actions taken for Rick John's seat would be to complete. Rick was only halfway through his term, so it would serve out the remainder of Rick John's term.
Right, so if I may, Chair, I'll amend my motion to, I move that we approve Denny Elmer to a position on the budget committee.
okay. So there's a motion on the floor for approval of Denny Elmer for the budget committee. Can we clarify the term for that would be July 1st of 2021 through
So it's
June 30th.
3 years.
June 30th of 2024? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I would
Okay.
consider my motion amended with that.
Okay. July 1st, 21, June 30th, 2024. Okay, there is a motion on the floor. Commissioners, any further discussion? No, okay. All those in favor of approving Denny Elmer for the Yamhill County Budget Committee for the term of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, welcome back, Denny.
And thank you for being willing to serve again.
Yes.
I would say that, I think, I can't remember, one of you reached out to him or as a follow-up.
Commissioner Sarah,
Sarah, you
Well,
did.
I wouldn't
Anything.
say I
Broke his arm.
reached out to him. I think it was more like I harassed him.
Got it.
I reached out a couple
Okay,
times.
that's what I
So
thought.
I,
Yeah.
I put the clothes on
Sometimes
him,
it's
though.
the pressure. It sounds like there was maybe more pressure applied with that one.
Okay, so we have a second position to fill the remaining term of Rick John's term. So this would be then effective immediately through
June 30, 2023.
23. Okay,
Mhm.
June 30.
And then Chair, I don't know, I haven't worked with Jason Fields, but I've interacted with Patty Herzog, who are the folks who we're considering for appointment to fill out the rest of Rick John's term. And she's most recently from Nevada, but she is working in this position at McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. And I've seen her work be very effective. I've watched her interact with both elected officials and candidates. I'd be very comfortable having her on the budget committee.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kula. I don't know Patty, but I do know Jason Fields. He's actually also serving on our nonprofit grant committee's selection committee. He's a longtime business owner here in the county. He actually manufactures and repairs old Volkswagen parts, which is kind of cool.
This is the rare air. I was like,
Mhm.
what's rare air?
Yeah,
I didn't
rare
look
air.
it up. I
Yep.
should've.
And his wife is, she works in the hazelnut industry. She also serves on our CERT teams, which is kind of neat. So I would also feel comfortable having him on. I think it's kind of nice to have somebody who's not really in government, come in and get a fresh look on the budget, fresh set of eyes. So. Commissioner Starrett, thoughts?
I tell you, Ms. Herzog's resume is really impressive. And I have to be honest, the first thing I thought of when I looked at her resume was, is there a way we could poach her for a position as our economic development
Right.
person? But I know that that would not be right or fair or any of that good stuff. But it was a really impressive resume. A couple of things, I do appreciate all that she brings. I do know that she just recently moved here to take this position. I am always wanting to see people on the budget committee who are business owners. And I think they bring an entirely different perspective to government. I look at Denny Elmer. I mean, here's a man who's signing the front of a paycheck and trying to figure out how to keep these businesses going through difficult times. So I've appreciated him, appreciated Rick John, business owners. So I also look at tenure here and, I've met Mr. Fields, but I don't know him. Having been in business in this county for 10 years, I think that speaks a lot to knowing the culture and again, a business person. So I would love to have Ms. Herzog kind of on our bench for something wonderful. But I think right now I would love to see a business person in that role because business people really scrutinize government spending and we really need that. So that's what I'm leaning towards, although they're both very, very impressive.
Yeah, I agree. Her resume is quite impressive. So she's definitely a gift
Yeah, I
to
forgot that
that
she
group
worked in the governor's office there.
in Nevada.
Until I was like, oh, yes, then I was scanning through it now. Yeah, I think that in the context, Commissioner Starrett, especially of having this be the remainder of Rick John's term, who I think the compelling factor was that he was a person who had a long time business in the community. I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay. Commissioner Starrett, did you want to, well, before we move approval, I would just say I think it's beneficial for us to decide today because the clock is ticking on getting budget packets prepared and getting folks up to speed on all of that. So did you want to move approval of Mr. Fields?
I will move approval of the applicant Jason Fields for the Yamhill County Budget Committee.
Okay, motion on the floor to approve Jason Fields for the Yamhill County Budget Committee to effective immediately through June 30th of 2023. Is there further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. Motion passes. Oops. Okay. Item I6 is discussion of AOC Federal Land Management Subcommittee, and this item was added by Commissioner Kula. Let's see.
And I will say, I wanted to make sure that we got it out here for discussion, but this is an area that before I joined the board, Commissioner Starrett was the person who was most active. I'm the second most active with it behind Commissioner Starrett, who I believe has the vote. Is that correct?
Well, it's very convoluted.
Yes.
However, I've got some information I'd like to share.
Yes, perfect. I wanted to open it up.
But I believe that Chair Bershauer would be our voting person, although I am willing to do it since I've gotten some information about the budget consideration, which I can either share with you or go to the meeting, which is a Thursday, and that might be an issue. So whoever wants to be the person, I will give you all the budget information I've gotten on this. And also the question remains is, does AOC disband this subcommittee?
And
So
that
that's
was
the
really, I
first.
wanted to make sure that whoever was the person who went and voted or shared their perspective, that we had an opportunity to discuss whether we want to be in favor of dissolving the federal land subcommittee or not.
And that's the letter
So-
that they want from us. They wanted
Yeah.
it by Monday, so I told them we wouldn't be able to vote on it till Thursday. So that's really the basic letter, and I think I've got that in the packet, a suggested letter.
We did not
didn't
put it in the packet because how you wrote it, you know, because the letter said that there was unanimous approval to do this, and I couldn't put that into the packet and possibly have a serial meeting. So I did not share.
You were
I
too
was-
opinionated.
I was putting something in there sort of as a template, because I didn't want to say approve, not approve, unanimous, not unanimous. But since every other county was saying they want to disband it, I
Yeah.
figured we're probably not going to
And
be
I
different.
was at the meeting, I can't remember whether you were at the meeting where they voted to, or they said, we're ready to
Right.
dissolve this. I think we are at the time of the subcommittee has come to be
Right.
done. So,
And whatever the board decides to do with that, we can quickly put something together. We can
Okay.
draft something and send that.
Okay. So just for clarification, before you jump into that, have we actually paid the dues for that subcommittee? Are they part of,
We haven't paid our dues yet,
we paid it last.
they're
year.
part of the overall
but we paid last year.
dues?
But we
Okay.
wouldn't,
Okay.
that's not the question. The question is, if we paid in 2020, then we are eligible to vote.
In 2021.
Correct.
2021.
We're eligible to vote.
Yeah,
Yes, we are.
2021.
Okay. So then the other issue is March 31st is a Thursday. This is at 1:30. And I don't know if we'll be done. We have a major land use hearing that day.
Hmm. Well, I think the first question is, do we want to vote to disband the subcommittee? That's what we need to send to them. And then we would also they would like the name of the commissioner who's going to be in attendance. So we would need to get that in there. And then we have to figure out, the 31st, if we can't be there, we can't be there, but we can also, what I was going to suggest we do is submit I know I've got concerns about some of their budget accounting and what that means. The other question is, what do we want to do with the money? And I would suggest that we return it to the counties who paid the dues and not roll it into operating expenses.
Right.
So that's just in a nutshell.
Chair, I would be in favor of directing Commissioner Sterrett to be our vote. And having her present that information. And just in case we are not done here, I mean, I don't want to put you in a position where you're rushing around, but I'm guessing that there's a virtual option.
Oh, yeah.
And if we're, we can always take a recess, I'm
Mhm.
assuming, right? If you need to step out of it,
Just
of this in order to join that.
I think I can send in with the proviso that we might be in a hearing, but here's my input and here is our vote. And I think they'll probably take that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
Because it's still going to go to the AOC Board of Directors, so.
Correct.
Do we need a?
So then the motion would be to approve the letter.
Well, the first is do we want to agree to disband or not disband? And if so, put together a letter to send in now.
Mhm.
And then after that, who is the voting member?
I'm happy to do those motions if you want.
Okay. Commissioner Kula, why don't you tackle the first motion?
Yeah, I would move that we approve the recommendation by the Federal Land Management Subcommittee to dissolve the Federal Land Management Subcommittee and submit a letter to that effect as drafted by Commissioner Sterrett. That'll be my first motion.
The old letter that nobody got to see.
Nobody saw. Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes.
And then, Chair, I
And
would
then the
move
Second.
that we authorize Commissioner Sterrett, if she's willing to take it on, to be our vote at the meeting that's been called for March 31st of 2022.
Motion is on the floor. Any further discussion? Commissioner Sterrett, do you accept?
Yes.
Okay. All right, all of those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes.
And then the third one,
Okay.
No, I was just going
Oh,
to
yeah.
ask if when that letter, if we could add to the letter that I would be the voting commissioner.
We can do that. We can have the letter reflect both of these motions.
Okay.
and then I would just say that the
And-
third one that I can think of, just to make sure that we're all have formally benighted you for this, is that when there's the discussion about where the dues should go, that you have our backing, right, on the
Returning the funds
returning the funds.
to the county.
Do you want that as a motion, or should we just have that as consensus?
Well, I think if we've had that discussion, then I can feel comfortable
Okay,
making it.
There's consensus.
Use it.
Thank you.
And so that letter will be sent out today. Seems like as soon as possible.
We all did that.
They are also.
Anybody?
Yes,
To email it to
Is it Brenda?
Brenda.
Yeah.
and,
Yes.
Brenda. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank
Okay,
you, Commissioner.
wonderful.
Thanks for letting me do some homework
Okay.
there. Thank you, Sarah.
Well, it sounds like she came prepared and then none of us even saw. it. Okay, item J is public hearing. We have no public hearings. And item K is announcements. Commissioner Cool, I wanted to ask you about this because I don't get to talk to you any other time.
Yeah.
So the Willamette Falls Locks Committee, I read that Grand Ron withdrew from that process. Is there an update on that?
Different one. So the Willamette Falls Partnership is what they removed themselves from.
Okay.
And the Willamette Falls Partnership is the multi-jurisdiction effort to get the Willamette Falls back into a place where people can visit it and move around and on that landscape, Westland to Oregon City Metro. The Willamette Falls Locks is on the other side of the river, and that's the ongoing effort to have the Army Corps of Engineers transfer ownership over to, and it's really a joint entity, is my
Mhm.
understanding at this point, the commission. Really.
Right.
So no conflict there in
Right.
terms of how Grand Ron is viewing
Yeah,
the work on the locks.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, good clarification.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was
and
kinda
there's
surprised
this,
by that.
yeah, I know, I knew that there had been ongoing disagreements.
Yeah. Okay.
And you
Sounds
can
like-
imagine it's a lot of different organizations who
Yeah.
have a lot of different perspectives.
Okay.
Did we ever
Um,
have the, because I know that's a governor appointment,
Yeah.
because I know Commissioner Olson.
Let me follow up on that again.
I think we had
Yeah.
pointed to Commissioner Fuller.
Mhm.
to
Okay.
And I
appoint.
haven't heard, but let me follow up.
The other announcement I have is, actually I have a few. Attended the Fair Board meeting this week, last week. It's not last week. And great news there for the fair. They are already at the level of ticket sales that they would be normally in June and July.
Wow.
So if you want to hear all the bands and sit in the golden circle, then you might as well buy them now because they're going to be sold out pretty soon. So
Do you know the bands offhand?
it's Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
No, really?
Jody Messina,
Oh, wow.
Night Rider, and I can't remember.
I can't
what
remember the
one
last
is.
one.
I think I added one too. So great news there.
Is Jody Messina related to Loggins and Messina? That's Christian's laughing because he's probably the only one up here who's old enough
Oh,
to
yeah,
remember
let me-
who Loggins and Messina were.
Let me respond to this one. I'm sure they're related.
I grew up listening to her. She's great. So I'll be there.
Night Ranger.
Ranger. This is Night Rider. Oh my gosh.
We're dating ourselves.
So great news there. And then the event center is actually booked through December. They have one spot in November. So
Nice.
really, really great there. I just wanted to thank our county clerk and staff. They have been managing some special elections that they did not anticipate, I'm sure, on top of the other work that they do and on top of implementing redistricting. So a lot of work on their plate. And I just wanted to say thank you and we're grateful for you and your work. Megan, Carolina, thank you for helping us navigate the first in-person meeting. And hopefully we can find a good way to handle the public testimony that comes in from there, which I actually just realized I forgot to ask before all of our agenda items, so.
And I was keeping an eye out to see if
Okay.
anybody would have raised their hand to
But
get
it's a
any
good
public.
reminder that folks will know. that
Yeah. So raise it.
When it comes up.
Okay.
Because the one part as far as procedures go, I mean, that was something fairly new that we implemented. We used to just have all the public comment during the public comment period, and that included agenda items. You know, so if it's more efficient to go back to that, to where we don't, you know, the only restrictions during the public comment period is not anything that's scheduled for a hearing or anything that's the quasi judicial land use hearing. You could do that and have a call, because again, that's public comment period. If somebody wanted to comment on H1, they could do that during the public comment period.
Mhm.
I'm here to comment on, you know, H1.
Mhm.
We went away from that to a certain degree, but again, I think that's a flexibility of the board and the chair to do it each meeting. So if you have an item, if we have an item on the agenda that we have a lot of folks that are here and wanting to get, and we know it's for that specific agenda item, you could always for that meeting then adjust and say, we're going to hold off on public comment on this agenda item until we come to it. And then you could open it at that time. So you have some options. It's completely up to the board. And if you let us know, we can continue to revise the instructions that are on the agenda.
Yeah, I think that might be easier to ask in the beginning and say, and if someone says, yeah, I have comment for, you know, I4 or I6, then I'll just mark it down and
Mhm.
then revisit when we're there. So,
Because the struggle we have, it worked much better before, but when we have a lot of people that are attending in person, we have comment cards and then
Right.
they mark that on there. And so we'd have all the comment cards ready to go. The change is having folks that are participating on the Zoom platform
Right.
that we're not necessarily collecting comment cards at this time. And we're also want to be sure, because sometimes we don't really have control over what they put for their names, but making sure that anybody who's on Zoom gives their name and address for the record is going to be
Mhm.
even more important to make sure we capture that information for the record as well.
right, okay. Okay, well, that was all of my announcements, commissioners, announcements.
I have
Commissioner
one.
Sarah?
I'm just always so impressed with the housing authority, with their staff, with their level of commitment. And one of the programs they have is called Family Self-Sufficiency, and they had a graduate. And usually what happens is people come in and they really are, you know, they're down on their luck, they're broke, and they're looking for all kinds of options. Well, this recent graduate just, she started a business during the pandemic. I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to identify her, but she started a business and she is now making $150,000 more than her starting out salary when she came in to get some help. So if that isn't the American dream, I don't know what is, but it's a beautiful story. And the other thing is I want to say thank you to First Federal, because they are sponsoring a Linfield intern to work during the summer at Housing Authority, and they're going to be paying the stipend for that. And it will not only help prepare them for the workforce, but will give Housing Authority some much needed help as they try to implement all kinds of things like Stratus and all the other things they're working on right now. So I always give kudos to Housing Authority.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
definitely. And they were one of the stops on our housing and shelter tour. And the time that they took with the folks who were there and the details and the people they brought in was incredible. It was my first deep interaction with them. I did want to note that I actually don't have the date of it yet, but there's apparently going to be a bike race in downtown McMinnville, sort of like running of the bowls in Pamplona, but with bicycles. So there'll be more details of that out there in the world soon, but I was
Not
pretty excited.
motorbikes.
I was pretty
Not
excited, right?
bicycles.
No, the ones you pedal, but it'll be just as fast.
Okay.
And then the other thing is just that we'll have the road safety tours, and I'll get
Mm-hmm.
Megan and Carolina the schedule to you by this afternoon.
Sounds good. Okay,
And we'll have a few folks from ODOT joining us too.
okay, great. Ken?
So I have a few things. The first one, is the broadband consulting RFP closed last week, and we need to reopen it. And what I'm looking at doing is I'm currently working with county counsel's office because we're looking at opening it up for another 30 days to see if we can get some more responses. And we've also had some direct communications as well. Yeah, not a lot of responses. So we really want to make sure that we get sufficient responses to the RFP so we can make an informed decision to implement that. So we're looking at reopening the, I'm working with Jody right now. I know she just sent me an email on the process, but we're going to open it up for another 30 days. That being said, we did, for the rural broadband, we did finalize the agreement with DOS, and we did receive the additional funds that we currently have in the account, the $2.2 million for rural broadband projects. So I'll provide some more updates in the next couple of weeks. The other couple items are just calendar things. I was contacted by TVF&R. As you know, the chief likes to come and do an annual update, and we tentatively, to get something on the calendar, we're looking at doing something on the 31st. It sounds like the chief's available to attend. We'll probably be joining remotely to give an update. So it's up to the chief if he's going to come here if he wants to attend remotely. And then the other one is, this is a little further out, but on April 14th, we'd like to schedule a work session. I think we'll call it a work session, where Dave Hogberg and Parkway Committee would like to come and talk to the board about the bypass.
Which date was that?
April 14th. So we'll get that, if there's agreement with the board, we'll get that added to the work session schedule and have it on
Sounds
the
good.
agenda.
That sounds great.
On the broadband, we kind of talked about this, that there might be a saturation of these types of projects right now because of all of this influx of money. Did Jody say that other counties were having success in other ways, trying to get maybe?
No, there was a couple, she had some ideas on some other places to advertise,
Okay.
and then just as timing would have it, we were also having some communications, and I actually heard from a vendor that, I don't know, not sure why they didn't respond to the RFP, but they've reached out and mentioned that they were possibly interested to learn more. And I was
Okay.
like, we'll stand by that. We're looking at reopening the RFP, and they can submit a proposal
Okay.
at that time.
Yeah, I think
Great.
primarily the idea would be to post it on the state's procurement system and try and cast a broader net.
Around that, yeah.
See if there's
Yeah,
anybody
which
we
is
missed in the
something
first
we've
go around.
historically not done.
Mhm.
So this is something new. Jody's bringing new ideas.
Broadband,
So-
internet, sorry, it's like almost. Okay, well,
Yeah.
great.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other announcements, Christian? No? Kristen?
Don't ask Christian for announcements, because if there's a soccer tournament that weekend,
Just
We're gonna know.
Oh.
don't make eye contact. Don't look at.
Well, since you asked, I'll just wish the
I
men's
didn't-
national
I
team
didn't ask.
success in their World Cup qualifying game tonight against
There
Mexico.
were two very long goals last night.
It's
There's
very
always-
strange
there's
to
always
not have
something to
anybody in
say.
the audience.
There's always something to talk
No,
about
there's three.
in the soccer world.
I know. I wish we could put their faces up there because I feel like we're talking to a blank room. Hopefully
Well,
more
there
people
are
come.
8 of 9 of us.
Well, and we also stream this on YouTube. So
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. All right, well,
Okay.
thank you so much for getting this all set up.
Yeah.
Thanks,
This,
everyone.
these new, this new technology is really neat. Although I'm
Very
having
nice.
trouble seeing it, so I'm gonna have to prepare for that better.
Very
Okay.
nice.
Anything
Thank
else
you.
for the good of the order? No?
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna close the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for March 24th.